talked about Gary and that you want to go through the construction season. So if we can get an understanding of if this money's not going to be here till next year, how can you do something this year? Dan Repay, take this.
We have some dollars that are still available down the state, and we have some small fixes, not small areas that we can fix and utilize those dollars. The commission has decided to direct those dollars to Marshalltown, which for geography. Oh, geez, oh man.
Jeez.
Geography.
Are we watching that Ball State? Or
Are we on the air?
Wait, hold on. Are we on the air? Can we get this?
I can hear you.
The geography of that area would be Central Avenue to the east to approximately Georgia or Martin Luther King. So that's a low area that
North or south of the Borman?
North of the Borman.
Okay.
Where the cheap piling's going in. That's the
right where you see INDOT doing some work over there as well. That's a part where we help with that project. That's a large area that protects a lot of residents. Also with the Burr Street, which is the EJ&E Railroad, which runs to the east of Griffith Golf Course as you go to the east all the way past Burr a little bit, almost to Clark Street. That segment will also be repaired this year, along with all the mechanical pump stations that we have under our jurisdiction in Gary and in Highland. Those will be fixed this construction cycle.
So the people in Munster that flooded out are going to ask the most logical questions. We're the ones who flooded. Why are you spending money in Gary?
And I have a good answer for that. Munster and Hammond, that portion of Hammond, are newly constructed, but to their, and I'm certain that the next visitor you have will tell you that they have been working with flood insurance relief with the city of Hammond to get those people the relief now that the construction of those segments are complete. I would suspect that you would see some positive news coming about probably midsummer on that front to both the people in Hammond from Forest or from State Line all the way to Northcott, and then in Munster from Hawthorne all the way to the state line as far as insurance relief. So they've got that segment taken care of, and Munster, for Munster's sake, you already have a new constructed levee, and as does Hammond. So the only segments that were, I guess, relatively old are Gary, Highland, Griffith, and then some parts of Highland.
Now, the part of the issue there is that, and Conservation Mike calls in, and we've had a number of these river junkies, for no other word to call them, and thank God for these guys that are into the river. But the water goes that way from, say, Wicker Park at Hart Ditch. The water goes that way, so if it starts backing up there, which many say was the problem when Munster flooded in 08, it wasn't necessarily a Munster problem, it was a Gary and unincorporated area problem. So, I mean, is that the idea, is to make sure that it keeps flowing out that way?
Well, absolutely, and on top of that, the commission put out a request for qualification for the watershed study, so we have to take care of our backyard, and then by the time our backyard is taken care of, we'll be able to go out and help other communities that are south of the river that feed into the system that will help not only their flooding problems and concerns, but also help the Little Cows as a whole, so that we all work, as your previous guest, Mr. Cap, said, we've got to take our jurisdictional blindfold off and stop looking at water going, well, that's just Munster, that's Gary. Well, guess what? We all depend on each other, and as Lake Station depends on Maryville, Highland and Hammond and Munster depend on Dyer and St. John.
Let's look at that analogy, Baker and Repay. You have Dave Cap in here, and he is just hammering away that, this is a regional problem, and especially the gang things. But he kind of has the weight to lean on these guys to make them work with him. You know what I mean? In other words,
thankfully I don't know what he means, but yes, yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? If the U.S. attorney says, hey, we want information, we want you doing blank, blank, and blank, even as a police chief, you got to go, okay, well, I got to do it. What about you guys? How are you going to draw everybody together, Baker?
Well, we did it already, D-Lo, in the aspect of getting the legislation passed, and it has to be through the elected officials that are downstate, including the governor's office, and then taking it to the congressmen and the senators. Because if they're educated about this project as being a fundamental infrastructure for the region that affects everybody, and they kind of understand how this thing works and how it was designed by the Corps, then they're the ones that are, once we get our room cleaned up, we start, you know, extending out and start going into Illinois and start going into, you know, Porter County. They're going to understand how that thing is going to work, and they're going to be, you know, what we see as the vehicle to try to break down some of the walls that are notorious for Lake County with this parochialism. So as a part of what Dan mentioned with this request for qualifications in this watershed study, is that we're going to look at what, you know, each individual community in the watershed has as far as their restrictions on water and how they're calculated. So we'll get those 9 or 10, you know, different plans and kind of tie those together to make sure there's some logic behind it, and start working on identifying some of the challenges outside of the, you know, direct Little Cal challenges, and start, you know, feeding into those and start having an overall plan to try to take care of the whole, I call it the gutter system on your house. So, you know, if we take care of all the downspouts, but, you know, parts are plugged up, the whole system's not going to work. So
Well, how are you going to get these people to work with you guys? I mean, it's been such a struggle to get where we are. I mean, right in the chair you're sitting there, I had your Rand talking about his interests. We have, you know, Shub coming in here talking about other interests over there. You've got Munster wanting its interest. We've got Dave Nellums here in just a little bit. You've got Highland. You've got Hammond. Gary had Karen Freeman Wilson in here just last week. I mean, everybody has such disparate interests for their parochial community. The question is, how are you going to get people to kind of agree on where all this money should be spent and what kind of plan it should be going forward?
I mean, I think the easiest way is to have the plan to dictate that. As Bill indicated, if you take everyone's individual plans and put it under an umbrella, which is us, none of us have to run for election, so we have to just do the right thing, which Bill tells me to do all the time. Just do the right thing and you're going to be fine, which I know, but I'm glad that he sits there and reinforces it to me. You'll be able to tell through this plan what the right thing to do is. Whether if it's to spend a great deal of money in, let's just say, Dyer. Dyer has a plan. You know, Dyer had mentioned that they want to buy Longwood Golf Course. If this study proves out that, you know what, if buying Longwood Golf Course and making a detention pond makes sense from a water flow standpoint and reduce flooding for everyone south or north of that area, then you know what? That's the best thing that we should do. Not, and that's what one of the difficulties would be about having an elected body govern this is, you don't want that. You don't want people, well, I didn't get my share. What we should care about is, A, we're protected, both our cities, but, you know, our INDOT, our roads are protected, and people are safe.
I just want to see you explain to the Gary City Council why you're taking millions of dollars to help buy Longwood Golf Course.
And
I mean, is that? I'm not saying it's the wrong thing. I just, you know, I want to be there when you do that.
It's all about communication, about going forward from this point, which we've communicated with them and keeping them in the loop, as well as keeping other communities in the loop about doing that. And that's what we're starting to do. We're starting to reach out. I believe I have a meeting later next week with Lake Station, and I've reached out to Dyer, and I've spoken with, you know, not directly to Mayor Uran, but a person under Mayor Uran about possibilities that they may have that we can help along with, that we can all benefit this thing together. So the communication is key, and it's key from the beginning right now. So when it comes down to that point where I'm going to say to the commission, hey, I recommend that we spend, you know, X amount of dollars here because this is the best thing, then they'll all be on board because they'll know what the plan is going forward.